It was a cold and snowy night when a young, very small boy played football with his brothers. It was cold and wet, but the boys tossed the football back and forth. The smallest boy wore a golden plastic helmet and pretended he was a famous athlete from the University of Notre Dame. His name was Rudy. Rudy rushed after his brother but could not make the tackle because he was too small. He stood up and dusted himself off and ran home for family dinner. They sat and ate while the glow of the TV filled the room. Rudy stared at the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team and dreamed about playing for the legendary program. Rudy told his father about his dream to play for the football team. Everybody laughed, but Rudy held on to this dream, and it carried him through the rest of the story.
Now, has anybody else got anything to say to me before I start this meal?
After high school, I'm going to play football at Notre Dame.
Rudy gave every ounce of his effort to play for the high school football team, but in the classroom, he just didn't do very well. His teammates and coaches loved his effort and intensity, but he was so small that he would never play beyond the high school level. In the classroom, he daydreamed most of the time and did not have good enough grades to even apply to go to school at Notre Dame.
Rudy, you don't have the grades for Joliet Community, much less Notre Dame. Not everyone is meant to go to college.
His dream of playing football for the Fighting Irish had faded, but was never forgotten. A few years after graduating, Rudy was working with his father, brothers, and best friend Pete at a metal factory. Pete was the only one who took Rudy seriously and always encouraged Rudy to follow his dream. One day there was an accident at the factory, and a huge explosion caused Pete to lose his life. Rudy sat alone and decided that he needed to follow his dream, and he had to do so immediately. With tears in his eyes, he said goodbye to his family and boarded a bus to South Bend, Indiana, where the University of Notre Dame was located. Rudy walked onto the campus in the early morning when the sky was still dark, and the only place open was a church. He sat with a priest named Father Cavanaugh. Rudy told him what happened to his friend Pete and about his dream to attend the university. Father Cavanaugh saw in Rudy's eyes that he was serious, and he decided to help him out.
Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to go to school here. And ever since I was a kid, everyone said it couldn't be done. My whole life, people have been telling me what I could do and couldn't do. I've always listened to them, believed in what they said. I don't want to do that anymore.
He gave Rudy a chance to bring up his grades and then apply to the University of Notre Dame. Rudy had a chance. Rudy sat in the front row and wrote as many notes as he could during class. His pen ran out of ink. His hands cramped, but he tried and tried and tried as hard as he could. That wasn't his only problem. He needed to find a room to rent and find a job. He snuck into the football stadium and went right up to the man in charge named Fortune. Rudy was willing to work for free just to be part of the school. Fortune took a breath and hired Rudy right then and there.
You're nuts.
Yeah, a lot of people have been telling me that lately.
Well, you've got to be nuts. You want to work for nothing.
I just want to be a part of this university.
Okay. Meet me here tomorrow, 10 a.m.
Thanks.
Minimum wage.
Rudy's days were spent studying, going to class, and then working. He was exhausted all the time, but his dream was so close he could almost grab it. One day at work, he and Fortune entered the football players' locker room, and Rudy was amazed. He had watched the Notre Dame football team his whole life, and now he was right there in the locker room, right where it all started for them. Rudy stood on the chair in the middle of the locker room and recited a famous speech he had memorized as a kid. Fortune looked up at Rudy and smiled.
We're going to go inside, we're going to go outside, inside and outside. We're going to get them on the run, boys. And once we get them on the run, we're going to keep them on the run. And then we're going to go, 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 go. And we're not going to stop until we get across that goal line.
The first semester flew by and Rudy checked his mail on campus. He had received a letter from Notre Dame. He read it hoping they had accepted him, but his face frowned as he read the letter. He had gotten decent grades, but they were not good enough yet. He had more work to do, so he studied harder, prayed more, and still had that full-time job. He applied again and again and again, but each semester he received the same rejection letter. Rudy grew frustrated and angry, but it was his dream, and so he pushed on. He had one more semester to go to make the grades to get into Notre Dame. It was now or never. He checked his mail, and sure enough, there was a letter. He walked out to a bench overlooking a lake, and he slowly opened the letter. His eyes watered. Tears ran down his face. He had made it. He would be admitted to the University of Notre Dame. He ran home to show his dad and his brothers. His dad was so happy he took out a microphone and told everybody at work that Rudy was going to Notre Dame. Everybody was so happy and wanted to celebrate, but Rudy had to get back to school. Football tryouts were starting soon. Rudy stepped onto the practice field for tryouts, and every single person was 2 to 3 times bigger than he was.
Let me tell it to you as clean as I can. We have 95 players here, so accomplished as athletes in high school. We gave them full scholarships to the best football program in the country. NCAA regulations allow us to dress just 60 for home games, which means at least 35 scholarship players are going to be watching the games from the stands. So if any of you has any fantasies about running out of that stadium tunnel with your gold helmet shining in the sun, you best leave them right here.
Rudy and another group of walk-on players ran through drills for over a week. They ran, jumped, dove, rolled, and sprinted so that the coaches could see their skill levels. When it came time to put on the pads, Rudy was knocked over and over and over again, but he always got back up and wanted more. When it came down to making the team, one coach stood up for Rudy and wanted him to be on the practice squad because Rudy put in so much effort. Rudy had made the practice team.
Now, you think you can give the same effort day in and day out for the next 5 months?
Sir, I have no doubt.
If you do, lighten up. One hair. I'll throw your butt off this team so fast you won't know what hit you.
Wait a minute. Just throw me off the team. That means I gotta be on the team first, right?
Don't let me down, kid.
Wait, does that mean I'm on the team?
Yeah, kid, you're on the team.
Thank you!
Hey, come on.
Week in, week out, Rudy played against the starters. They pounded on him every single day, and Rudy was always in pain. He had to ice his entire body after practice. His shoulders, his legs, his neck, his feet were all badly bruised. Some players respected the effort and intensity that he put out there, while others did not. One of his friends told him that he would never make the team and had to lighten up, but Rudy only knew one way to play, and that was to give everything he had.
You're John Williams out there is making us all look bad, so won't you dial it down a notch?
Dial it down?
Yeah, everybody's getting sick and tired of hearing, why don't you put out more like Rudiger? What do you get out of getting your head kicked in every day? It's not worth it, you know? You gotta be in at least one play during a regular season game to go down on the books as officially being part of this team. And you can count on it. The only uniform you're gonna be putting on is that grungy thing you've been wearing every day.
One day after practice, Rudy went to the head coach's office and asked to dress for one game next year. The coach liked Rudy and was grateful for all his hard work he put on the practice field. Rudy explained why it was so important for him to be on the sidelines for just one game. He wanted to prove that everyone who doubted him was wrong. Coach took a breath and said, "Okay." Rudy would dress and be on the sidelines for one game next year. Rudy called his father and brothers and told them to be ready.
I would really appreciate it if you could let me dress one game next season.
Is this just for your father?
No, it's for everybody who told me that being a Notre Dame football player would be impossible. It's for my brothers, the kids in my high school, the guys I work with at the mill. They can't come to practice and see that I am part of the team.
Okay.
Okay?
You deserve it. You'll dress for one game next season.
A few weeks later, Rudy got word that the coach who had promised him had quit the team, and a new coach was calling the shots. Rudy was devastated. The promise was gone, and Rudy would have to impress a whole new coach and make the sideline list. Week in, week out, Rudy played hard at practice and tried to get noticed, but every week he was left off the list. It was the last game of the season, and Rudy walked to the locker room and did not see his name on the list. He grew angry and quit the team right then and there. He stormed out of the building and ran into his old friend Fortune. Rudy told Fortune what happened and why he quit. Fortune stepped up to Rudy and looked at him right in the eye and told him what he thought.
So you didn't make the dress list. There are greater tragedies in the world.
I wanted to run out of that tunnel to prove to everyone that I worked.
What?
That I was somebody.
You're 5 feet nothing, 100 and nothing, and you got hardly a speck of athletic ability. And you hung in with the best college football team in the land for 2 years. And you're also gonna walk out of here with a degree from the University of Notre Dame. In this lifetime, you don't have to prove nothing to nobody except yourself. And after what you've gone through, if you haven't done that by now, it ain't gonna never happen. Now go on back.
Rudy was stunned at what Fortune had said and decided to go back to the team. He walked back onto the practice field, and when the team saw him, they all started clapping for him. That day, the players on the team approached the coach and placed their jerseys on his desk and said they wanted Rudy to dress instead of them. The coach said no at first, but after the whole team laid down their jerseys, he had no choice. Rudy would finally get to run out of the tunnel like he had always dreamed of. The day of the game, Rudy's whole family walked into the stadium and looked for him on the sidelines. It was easy to spot him because he was the smallest guy on the field. Rudy was having a great time on the sidelines watching the action, and it was a great game. The Fighting Irish were leading late in the game when the coach said to play all the seniors, all of them but Rudy. The players begged the coach to put Rudy in, but he refused. One player started chanting, "Rudy, Rudy," over and over again. Some other players started to chant as well. Then people in the stands caught on and cheered and chanted, "Rudy, Rudy, Rudy." Soon the entire stadium was chanting Rudy, and after a few minutes of the whole stadium on his side, the coach reluctantly put Rudy into the game. He ran onto the field pumping his fists into the air, and the crowd went wild. He lined up for his first and only play. His eyes focused on the quarterback and his hands planted in the ground. When the snap of the ball came, Rudy rushed through the offensive line, ran down the quarterback, and tackled him. The game was over, and the players lifted Rudy onto their shoulders, and the crowd cheered so loudly, the stadium rumbled. Rudy was carried off the field, and since 1975, no other Notre Dame player has ever been carried off the field. The end.